one year I got invited to be in a room. I was on a team at the time working for someone else. I got to be a part of like a team retreat where we were planning the next year. And I remember being in the room and we had our own business at the time, but it was pretty small. It was just me, Chelsea, and like our office assistant. That was basically our team. I remember being in the room and thinking to myself, man, I like never want to have to do this. It sounded so complicated to have all these departments and things. And little did I know, just a couple years later, we would be hosting our very own team retreat with departments and things and goals and all this stuff. And the crazy part is the guy who hosted that first retreat that I was like kind of reluctantly like, oh no, like I hope this isn't in my future. He was the same guy that ended up leading our team retreats. And I'm so thankful that I met him because he really helped me see the pathway forward to really scale a business without burning out ourselves. If you looked at our business just a couple years ago, basically our organization chart, which is kind of like the organization, how the company works, it was like us kind of at the top CEOs and then everyone beneath that, right? And when we started building coaches and complexity and all the things that our business has, everyone came to us as their direct report, as their boss. And there was no structure. And so it just added more and more and more time to our plate. And it's funny because we're all about time freedom. That's literally what we teach people to have. But we were starting to see it get sucked away in our own business. And honestly, Aaron came in at the perfect time. Our guest you're going to hear from today, he came in at the perfect time to really help us set up the structure to have that like kind of creativity, but also have the structure that we could truly grow with without taking out our family in the process. So with that, I just want to welcome Aaron Hovivian to the show.
Oh man, thanks you two. I'm so excited to be here. So honored. And I'm grateful that you brought me in today.
Man, I'm so excited to have you here because you truly, I feel like we're the key to really help us get to the next level in our business and impact. Like we couldn't reach the number of people we're reaching today without the systems that we set up with your team like 2 years ago. So this guy, you guys, came into our business, brought his whole entire team and really helped work with us to systemize, structure things, create a meeting cadences, help us plan our goals and do it in a way that we actually achieve those goals. And so we want to bring that to the podcast here today. And so I'm going to encourage you guys, get some notes because you're going to have some action items on today. We don't want to overwhelm you, but we want to equip you with some actual tangible takeaways. And so where I wanted to start was actually kind of that team retreat, because what we were doing at that team retreat, ours and the one I was at, where we were talking about rocks. Okay. And I was like, what is this? Rocks? Like, what are we talking about here? Rocks. And it was a way of thinking about goals that really helped me actually start to get more done. And so can you talk to us about rocks and why rocks are so important to think about for your business?
Yeah, absolutely. And let me just say this too. I feel like you always give me so much credit for like helping you guys get to that next level. But I really feel like it was such an honor and a privilege for me because when we were in that first room where you were like, man, I never want to do one of these things. And, and I was in that room thinking, man, I really hope I get to work with Stephen and Chelsea one day. And that's sincere. That's not me like just padding a conversation here. This is like so much respect for you two. And especially not only the gift that you have in teaching people and what you share that's so authentic. I felt like as somebody that's been under the hood, deeply under the hood of everything that you guys do, so integrity filled all the way through everything that you guys do. And I could tell that even in those days and even more, it's always just so awesome when you sit with people and you're like, no, these people are the real deal. Like this, they are through and through how they appeared that first time I was at that meeting with you all the way through. So thank you for that. Super honored. And I attribute a lot of your guys' growth to the fact that you guys were like, hey, we're going to install this system in our business and we're going to stick to the system. And Rocks is really a big part of that, right? So the system we talk about a lot is EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System, from the book Traction by Gino Wickman. Rocks is just, they say the way that you eat an elephant is one bite at a time. All of us come up with these grand plans for how I'm going to get to the end of the year and I want to be here, but they can get lost sometimes in translation. And visionaries are really, really bad at like chasing the shiny object, whatever they get excited about. This is the next greatest deal. I've got to do this. Oh, this is going to be my best idea yet. And they get so excited about it in the week to week and the month to month. And they forget, no. This was where we said we wanted to be at the end of the year. And there's a trajectory, a straight line that could be pulled from top to bottom. And the way that we're going to get there is by chunking that down to bite-sized pieces, right? Eating the elephant one bite at a time. And that's going to come by big initiatives that we're moving on a quarterly basis and holding our people accountable to, not just us as leaders, as visionaries, but helping our people to identify, hey, that is in your zone. That's in your zone of brilliance. And that's something that you can do. Okay, awesome. We're going to assign that to you. You've got 3 months, a quarter to get through that. And what are the stepping stones you're going to take to get us from not done to done so at the end of this quarter, we can move on to the next set of big chunk that we want to get through so that I can get to the end of the year with complete. So I think that's the best way I can break down rocks.
Yeah, I love this, Aaron. And I really want our listeners to know and to understand when Steve and I first started hearing about EOS or rocks or like an org chart and how all this works and company structure, I think it can be very overwhelming and it might be met with some like resistance. So if you're listening to this and there's a little bit of resistance, like Steve and I are very much, we come from a creative background. We didn't run any numbers before Rainmakers or Amazon. We didn't like, we were just like, we don't need it. We glazed over it. And there were a few people in the space talking about it when we were in the wedding industry. But I look back on that now and be like, man, we probably missed out on revenue or didn't realize how valuable our skill set was and what we were charging. And so I know that there might be listeners that are like, I'm just getting started out, or I have one team member, one VA, like, this is like, now I have to implement a new thing, but I really want you to catch that like this, what we're talking about and having metrics and actually having like sizable goals, like bite down, like sizable things that you can actually do and accomplish is so important. And what might feel like a constraint is actually an invitation into freedom. And Steven and I, because we have these goals, both personally and professionally, like it gives us the confidence and the faith to move forward and see areas that we need to improve on. So I feel like before we dive more into that, like it's just so important. And I know that's your heart too, Aaron. But like, I would love to know, like, before getting, I know it might be going backwards just a minute, but like, were you always the most like organized or like rock? Like, how did you figure out EOS? And like, when did you see like that change your life or your businesses that you were running?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I think I've always been systems oriented. I felt like you watch, it's funny how your life builds, and you don't see it until you look back, but I can look back now and see some of the beginning days of, I started working in retail pretty early on, and was skateboard, snowboard shops, and it was just a cool job to have, but very quickly began picking up on systems. And I was the one that ended up writing their whole handbook on like, this is how you do it. And I was a kid back in the time. And then just watching as I took different jobs, different places, like taking apart, oh, that's how that works. And asking questions, a lot of systemized stuff. But when I found EOS, was actually with Pete Vargas. Pete Vargas was the one who introduced me to EOS. And I was actually his director of ops at the time. He was just building up Advance Your Reach. I mean, obviously Pete Vargas's name was really big in the industry now, and he's an amazing dude. But back then, he hadn't lifted quite as high as he is now. And, he had heard about EOS and he had brought in a bunch of implementers to come and teach him the ways of how EOS worked. And I happened to be on the ground floor when that implementer came in and started teaching EOS. And, there's different things that speak our love language, right? Like all of us have a different love language, but I was like, lady started talking about EOS and I'm like, that makes so much sense to me. You know what I mean? And it was like one of those things. And so as we talk about systems, I do think, Chelsea, that's a really good point is they're going to be, I'm not here to say EOS is the only way. It's the best way. If you do it any other way, you're doing it wrong. What I'm saying is find a system that speaks your language and commit to it. Cause I think that that's the thing I can give you guys the most kudos for was like, what was something that resonates with you and then commit to it. Don't like pick up and put down, because then it could be the best system in the world and it's not going to work because you didn't give, it's like a diet, right? Like we get really excited about in the first month and then month two, we start craving the things that we were eating before that. And then we go back to some of those things and we're like, we're not making any progress. This dang diet doesn't do anything for me. Yeah, but it's like, no, it's that you weren't true to it and you didn't commit yourself to it. So I think for me, I found EOS, and that was probably back like 2016, 2017, so now it's been, 7 or 8 years of doing EOS. And I feel like all the more like it has just become ingrained in me to the point where it's like, we talked about a little bit before the show, we joke around about, L10 is the meeting structure in EOS, L10, your date night, L10, your children, like L10, like only because it's like, it's just taking something that you're so passionate about and putting numbers to it so we can judge, is this successful? Is this not successful? Do I keep putting energy at this? Do I stop putting energy at this? Because otherwise you can burn a bunch of time and energy into things that really aren't really getting you very far, but really cost you a lot. So I think that I love it for those reasons.
Yeah, and EOS, like if this is the first time you're hearing about it on the podcast, there's a book, Traction. It's on our recommended book list. It's definitely an intense book, like I would say. And there's some like, I think there's one called What the Heck is EOS, which is like kind of a simpler version. But there's kind of these components that make it up. Rocks is one of them. The other one that you heard mentioned is L10 meetings, which is basically just a meeting structure that's really efficient. And if you want to hear us talk about how we use that meeting structure in our family meetings, actually just talk about not even business, just family. We have an episode, it's episode 99, and we go into our family meeting. We actually show like our template and like, here's what you can do with your family in 30 minutes every single week to just feel totally aligned, to look forward in the future, not be surprised, to really support each other. And that L10 format is what we're using, a toned down version for our family. That's the same format we use in our business. And so you heard about rocks. You heard about the L10s. I feel like the next piece that I loved, and we did another podcast episode on this, is the scorecard. But before we get to that, I feel like part of EOS, I think its strength is that it has accountability to it. When you said systems, I was kind of like, it's almost like a systematic way of reaching your goals.
Right.
And so like, to make it simpler for people, like a rock could be like for our family, we have rocks too for the year. Like, hey, this is a big rock. We want to, and they might be more broad rocks. Like we want to have one-on-one time with our boys, right? We have 2 boys now. So like, I want to have one-on-one time with Kai and one-on-one time with Ollie. Right. So what does that look like? So we always chunk down rocks into what does that practically look like? That looks like me doing Ollie one week and Kai the next week and then alternating. So Chelsea has Kai while I have Ollie. I have Ollie while she has Kai, and we just create a system around it. And so it could be like, even for us at the beginning of the year, one of our big rocks was like, okay, let's continue to grow in our intimacy in our marriage. What does it look like to do that? Let's schedule date nights. So we scheduled all of our date nights for the entire year at the beginning of the year, right? And so that helps us achieve that rock because we know we're taking the chunks, the small steps towards it. So I just want to kind of share those examples to simplify for people. If they're like, this is kind of getting a little too businessy, you can apply this to your marriage, your life, your kids. It's a system of accountability to help you stay in momentum. So Aaron, I would love to talk about like those moments where things are getting a little too intense. Like you're looking at your rock, you're trying to chunk it down, but you're like, oh man, like I'm getting kind of stretched here. Maybe it's in the family life, maybe it's you're trying to do the business and the family, and it's getting a little bit too stretched. What is your strategy for that?
I would say whatever we're talking about, like, let's break it down. I love that you guys are so good at this. Like, let's break it down to simplest form like that, because it's so easy to get overwhelmed, right? Can we just acknowledge that for a minute? We live in a very loud world and there's so many things that bombard us for our attention. And it's so easy to get overwhelmed. Like that's all of us, no matter how successful you are, whatever you deem successful is, or if you feel like, man, I'm just starting and I just already feel overwhelmed, let alone to think about what these people are talking about. That makes me feel even more overwhelmed. I would say wherever you're at on the spectrum of overwhelm, what I found really helps me most is writing out a list, right? Like let's write out all the things that I feel most overwhelmed about. And then let me then prioritize which one of those things I feel like are the most important of those things that I need to probably put some attention on, right? Because we're going to all feel better if we can cross something off of just, there are all kinds of studies about like writing things down just for the sake of the dopamine hit you get for crossing things off, right? I think that write it out, prioritize it. And then the things that this is what, and I think this is where you'd like me to go with this one, Steven. So tell me if it's not saying, no, you're going the wrong way. But I think that there's a tool within EOS called Delegate Elevate. And I love it because it's like, once you identify what the priorities are, then you need to ask yourself, am I the best one skilled to move this thing? Am I the best one to be assigned to this, attached to this, And maybe you say, Aaron, I don't have a big team. I don't have different necessarily people I can assign it to. Well, there's probably some people around you that love you. Pedro Adeo calls them the whatever it takes, like the WITs, the people that are just like there with you that are going to help you see things through, that you can ask for help. And I would say once you line things out, you might not be the best one to address that thing that's overwhelming you. And the best way that you can operate in your brilliance is by delegating things that aren't in your brilliance. So EOS has a tool called Delegate and Elevate, and it's all about how do I live in my zone of brilliance? It's 4 different quadrants. And the top one is love it and I'm great at it. And the bottom one is dislike it and I'm not good at it. And there's a whole spectrum between that. And I think that identifying on that list, once you've identified top priorities, is that my priority though? Or is there somebody I could hand this down to that probably would do this a lot better than me? And I could just help nurture it forward. So I think that's the biggest thing, is identifying what is it that you're really good at and that you really love that's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck out of your time or your people's time, right? Maybe maybe you have a couple people who work for you. Ask yourself, yeah, but are they good at that? I'm about ready to hand that to that person. Do they suck at this? Like, what in the heck am I doing? Handing that down to them? It's only take them 3 times longer because they don't want to do it or they're not good at it, So I think those are things that I would always work through when you're creating your list.
As entrepreneurs and parents, convenience is key. But that doesn't mean you should have to sacrifice quality. For years, we nerded out on coffee, trying to get the highest quality, but that takes a lot of time, weighing the beans, getting the right grind, getting your water to the perfect temperature. And so when we had kids, we kind of shifted to the pod system, right? And it was a major downgrade. That was until we found X Bloom.
X Bloom works with the best roasters around the country, and their machine truly brings the specialty coffee shop experience to your home. If you love a good pour over, I highly recommend you check this out. You can elevate your coffee drinking experience while keeping up with your kids. If you're ready to transform your mornings, head to rainmakerfamily.com/deals to get started. That's rainmakerfamily.com/deals. Yeah, I think that's really good. Delegating and elevating. Like, even if you, like, I'm just thinking practically, I mean, business side of things, but I go to like moms in our community and like, I don't like meal prepping usually, or like chopping up veggies. I love eating vegetables. I love cooking from home. I love all of those nutritional aspects, but I don't necessarily love like the prep work of that. So like, we have a nanny. I think you could do this with a high school student or a babysitter. Like, when you put the kids down for a nap, or if you pay them to stay 20 minutes longer, could you have them like chop up all your week's worth of like food prep for you, so that when you go downstairs, when you're ready for the meal, you can just like throw it in a pan and cook it and you're good to go. I mean, they could take it a step further and like cook it, but there's like a simple example of like delegate and elevate like right there. So it's like, you're still getting the desired result. Like, you want to cook healthy meals 3 times a week or whatever. And here's like somebody who can step in to help you in your life. So
It's huge. Yeah, no, we've been eating a lot at home, and it's because of this, because we live a pretty full life, and it's way harder when you have to like prep everything, clean up everything. It's just like such a more mental energy, right? And we want to be home with the boys. We want to eat at home. We want to just like go out all the time, right? Like, even though that's easy. And so this has really helped, because like the love it is actually the cooking. Like, Chelsea loves cooking. I love cooking. I love making good stuff with quality ingredients. But the not love it part was the chopping of ingredients, right? And like all the prep and cleanup stuff. So, we just want to share these examples with you as you're listening to this, to see how this applies to all areas, the delegate, elevate framework. Now, I feel like one of the hardest things for especially creative entrepreneurs, we actually talked about this on your podcast. So if you guys want to go deeper on this, you can listen to Aaron's podcast, and I was interviewed on his show. But I talked about how we came from a creative entrepreneurship background. And a lot of times the curse of the creative is like not wanting to release control, right, of the art. And so there's like this art to business and launching products and all these things. And it can be really hard to release control as you're growing. But as you're growing and things are happening, and now, oh man, I can't be the person doing that thing anymore. You have to bring other people up alongside you to really continue the impact and continue the growth and continue like reaching towards those goals. And so one of the things that's been so impactful for us, and me especially, it's my favorite part of the week, is what we call the scorecard. This is another component of EOS. We actually have another podcast. So we have like kind of like now a 3-part series, I feel like. We have episode 99 talking about the L10 meetings. We have episode 132. Okay, episode 132 that talks about the scorecard, like really in depth. But Aaron, from your perspective, like maybe just simplify the scorecard. What is it, first of all? Because I'd love to hear your explanation of it. And then we could talk about how we've kind of used that in our businesses, our Amazon business, our Rainmaker business, and even our life. We can give some examples.
Yeah, that's great. No, that's a great. Scorecards are beautiful for me because now let me start with saying this. I know not everybody loves spreadsheets. I know not everybody loves chasing a bunch of numbers. Maybe you look at numbers and it makes your head hurt. I think that the beauty of scorecard is, for me, is there are probably, though, a set of numbers that doesn't have to be a ton of them, that tell the best story on, is this energy I'm giving to this thing beneficial? Is it benefiting? And is it working? Is it not working? You know what I mean? And you really can't know that until you start tracking it. So whether that's, like you're trying to lose weight, like you're not going to probably know until you start measuring on a scale, or you start like tape measuring yourself, like on, are the parts of me shrinking that I want to shrink? Or if you're trying to grow and get buff, like are my arms growing the way that I want them to grow, whatever it is, like until you start measuring it, it's really hard to know, is this successful? And sometimes I think that we can sometimes fall in love with our own stuff and we're like, this is so great. Everybody must love this. But it's like, yeah, there's a part of that that needs to be there, but you need to know, especially if you're making a business of something, or I think it can come back to, I've got 4 kids, right? Like how I'm actually showing up for my children, like that's measurable. Like there's a measurable way to determine that. Like how many times have I made meaningful connection? For me, you guys talked about personal metrics for yourself, even in your family. For me, I set out annual goals every year and I've got quarterly goals for myself too. And part of those are like, how often am I getting special time with my kids? All my kids are grown up and they've moved out, right? So for me, I've set up virtual dates. We do virtual lunch dates by Zoom and I buy them lunch and we sit down and we have conversations like this over Zoom so that we can have lunch together, even though they live far away. But for me, I measure out how many times have I connected with each of my 4 kids this quarter? How many big trips have I taken with my kids this year? I try and make something special. It doesn't have to be a huge trip, but a road trip to go see this concert. I was just down with my daughter, Hope, in Arizona, going to see Noah Khan in concert. You know, it was such a beautiful time. Me and my 22-year-old girl, you know, but like, if you don't make something measurable, then it's hard to know, am I being successful? So all a scorecard is a set of numbers that tell you, is this successful of what I'm putting my energies at? And the beauty of a scorecard is it's weekly metrics, right? Like any of us that have a business for, you know, we always hear we need to have a P&L, a profit and loss statement, but you're like, man, I don't even understand what my profit and loss statement even says or even means. And maybe it gets overwhelming. Well, a profit and loss usually is pulled like a month after, you know, like 6 weeks from origin of numbers. So you're looking at old numbers, you know, like 6 weeks ago, how much can I change what happened 6 weeks ago, you know? But the beauty of scorecard is you set up the numbers that are important to you, and then you watch those week over week. And just by saying, these are numbers that are important to me, I'm going to watch them week over week, you start seeing things move up or move down. And then you've got to determine, do I want that number to go up or do I want that number to go down? Maybe I want my weight to go down if I'm dieting, you know, but maybe I want my sales to go up if I'm trying to sell something. So whatever it is, if you're doing personal scorecard or you're doing a business scorecard, determine what are the numbers that tell the best story. I'm going to put attention on this thing like a funnel, right? I'm going to put a bunch of energy at the top and I want it to funnel down to the results I'm trying to get to. And I'm going to measure those week over week. So I hope that explains it.
Yeah, that's it. That's so good. And especially when you do this in community, because we do this, we actually don't have a scorecard for our family meeting yet. We have big rocks and we have quarterly check-ins, but that's kind of as advanced as we've gotten with them. But we have scorecard with our business. And it's so cool because everyone in the team has basically numbers that they report on every week. And they bring it in front of everyone and say, here's my number for the week, right? And that's the thing that kind of represents their impact in the business that week. And they are setting goals for their own number and they're trying to reach those goals. And the cool thing is every week we can kind of see, is it on track to the goal or is it off track? If it's on track, it's green. If it's off track, it's red. We have a spreadsheet. So literally at a glance, we can see the entire business, everything that's happening in it. Are we green or are we red? Right. And it's such a helpful thing. And again, to make this like, let's just bring it, I like to bring it to family because it's like, let's just make it super simple. Okay. So let's say our sons, our boys, and they need to be outside. Like they have to be outside for like 1 to 2 hours a day. Otherwise it's going to be trouble. Like it's going to be like the house is going to be destroyed. So maybe one of our goals is like have healthy, happy boys. Okay. That's a big rock for the year. And so our scorecard could be that our goal could be like they get 1 hour, 1 to 2 hours outside every day. Okay. So every week, if we had a family meeting, we could be tracking this and we could go, okay, how many hours this week? Was it above 7? Awesome. We're in the green, right? It was below 7. Okay. We're in red. It makes sense why we had a hard week. Right. And so it helps you like put accountability and tracking things. Now that's just kind of like a silly example, but it almost is like, I almost see it like it's like a chore chart or a star chart, you know, like one of our Rainmaker sells a little star jar. When your kids do something, you give them a little star in the jar, you know, like in the jar. And it's just like, it's like that for adults. It's like, we need this type of like, one, it's a cool dopamine hit to like track the thing and see progress and set goals. Hey, now we want to get 14 hours outside every week. Right. And you start working towards it. That's not a real goal. I'm just showing you a funny example, but, it not only holds you, gives you like insight into what's happening in real time, but also holds you accountable, especially in front of other people, to know when you're going off track. So you don't get to like, you know, set the New Year's resolution or whatever it is in January and you get to February and realize you're totally off track. You would know every single week, I'm trending the wrong direction, and it helps you pivot a lot faster.
Yeah. Aaron, I would love to know, and on the topic of delegate and elevate, because I think I even saw a post in our community like this week. We had one of our students, she had an awesome talk with Kimberly, who's our operations manager, who I know you
I
love. You
love
love Kim.
Kimberly. Yes.
And Kim is awesome. And she's done a lot of like hiring, and she was encouraging a student to go hire her first VA and was kind of teaching her some skills in that. And so our student has been posting in the group and sharing her journey about like hiring this VA and what she's having her doing. And I saw one comment on that after she had hired this rock star. There was a student that said, like, I don't even know where to begin with what to like outsource. And the thing is like, there are so many agencies, there are so many places all the way from like US based to like overseas that can help you do so many things in your business. And sometimes I think like, even if you are good at something, it doesn't always mean that you should be doing it either. So I just want to know, like, I know you said delegate and elevate, like, first of all, like living in your brilliance, but like, what are some simple things that people can take when looking at what they're doing in their business and how they could maybe outsource that? Like, do you have a strategy or like something they could like walk through today and do to really think through that?
No, I think that's a beautiful question. I think that for me, what I'll always challenge people with is whatever you're doing right now, right? Create your list of all the things you do. Like I have a tool out there called the Gap Analyzer, you know what I mean? Where it's like, document, what are you doing on the daily? What are you doing on the weekly? What are you doing on the monthly? How much time is it taking in each one of those things? Just to like get that on a piece of paper. Let's start having a conversation just about time. How much does that really take you? How much time does it take you to do those things? And then roll it all up and see how much it totals to. But I think that once you've identified each one of those things, begin to ask yourself, does that require me anymore? Does that require my brilliance? Or could I create an SOP, a standard operating procedure of how to do that? You know what I mean? The easiest way to delegate down is by creating an SOP that somebody can follow, right? So it's like, after you've written out your list and especially identified some things that are taking a lot of time, ask yourself, but does that have to be me? Or if I wrote out a solid list of how you do that, could I hand that down to somebody else? And maybe you're still in, maybe that makes you anxious or you get nervous about handing something down that's so important to you. Like you can still be there for quality control, right? Like let them do the whole lift, push it back to you for you to review. But I'm promising you, it's going to take you way less time to review something somebody else has done than you doing the thing, right? So I would say, make your list, identify what's taking you the most time. Ask yourself, does that have to be me? Or can I SOP this out, delegate this down to somebody else, let somebody else do it? And now you just opened up this whole new cross section of real estate within your time. And then you can ask yourself, what can I fill that real estate with of things that do require me? You know, I know when we first started with Rainmakers, like Stephen was so deep in all the weeds. Like he was in all the things, all the stuff, all the tech, like everybody was coming to Stephen for stuff. And Chelsea, you too, like coming and just bombarding your time to the point where it's like hard to even see the forest for the trees for how much people things. And the best thing I think that we did in those early days was identifying what requires Stephen though, what requires Chelsea though, and are those things that they love and are passionate about? And even if maybe it's not something they love and are passionate about, is that something that they could transfer to somebody else if they just wrote it out so that they could buy themselves some more time? And Chelsea, I honestly really saw you blossom over the last several years on saying, you know, as a mom of two, especially now that Ollie's been born, I need to be even more aggressive on how do I save my time? You know, and I think that probably the way that came was identifying what's taking most of my time. And does that have to be, or can I give that to somebody else? And the best way I can give it off somebody else is by documenting the steps, handing it down, quality controlling it if it's important to me at the beginning, and then releasing them. And then that enables you to take on things. And this is the other thing I found, and I'll stop talking. But the other thing I found is there are so many people that are just looking for opportunities. Like they want to level up. They want to grow in their skill set, and they're just hungry for wanting that. And sometimes we being selfish, holding on to those things is actually slowing down their growth. So that thing that you're like, I wish to God I didn't have to do this every single day. There's somebody that's probably around you that's looking for an opportunity that's a great opportunity that you could gift them and they could level up doing. And it would also free you up the thing that you're most called to do.
Yeah. And I think too, I've seen this in that release of control. Like they've done it better than me.
Oh yeah.
They'll do it better than me. Like this is just a way back example. I struggled for years in our wedding business outsourcing our editing. And that's like a big topic of like, should you outsource? Should you not? And Steven
Right.
started before me. And it was so hard because I had tried initially and they didn't do as good of a job,
Sure.
which is a whole nother thing about like you actually have to communicate strongly what you want. People can't read your mind, and it is like dating. You get to know each other and build a relationship. But at the end of our wedding career, like the editor was such a more powerful, stronger editor than I. Of course, I did quality control, like you said, and I, tweaked a few things and did some black and white images. But overall, like the things that I struggled with, like skin tones and matching color, they were like so good at. And I just like, I would be so much faster. I would serve the client at a higher level, just outsourcing. But I believe so long that only I could do it, or that I would get honestly, I would get frustrated because they didn't nail it perfectly right then and there. And so, I mean, that's a whole nother topic about taking full ownership as a leader and being like, it's my fault they didn't get right because I didn't communicate correctly. But yeah, I think you'll be surprised that somebody might be able to do it more efficiently and better than you. And how cool is that you get to have somebody on your team who is that way? And I think as leaders and as you grow and scale, whether you're going to have a massive company or you're, one of our mamas who's just getting started, like how cool is it that you can have people come alongside of you to give you more time freedom to help serve and create that mission and impact that I think we all want.
Powerful. I'm just thinking of the moms out there too, because we get this when we talk about outsourcing. Oh, well, I wish I had the money to outsource like you guys, And so I just encourage you, like, be resourceful with what you do have, because sometimes delegate and elevate doesn't mean paying someone. It means just trading something. Maybe you love meal prep and your friend loves watching the kids, And so like have your friend come over, watch the kids, you meal prep for everyone. It's a win for her. It's a win for you, right? Like she gets meals, you get childcare, and you get time to yourself to do some solo cooking. Like if that's, you find what you love, and then you're resourceful with that to find other people that can come in, And so I remember even when we were doing Airbnb originally, like we were making the beds at first and cleaning the rooms, and that was fun for a couple times, right? And then eventually you're like, oh, this is pretty easy to make a checklist on how to clean the room, right?
Yeah.
And you can just pad it into the Airbnb fee, and now it just pays someone else to do it. And it's just like, wow, that freedom of of delegating and elevating, because it's not just about delegating and draining the bank account. It's about delegating and elevating. And now you have more freedom, time, flexibility. You have, more time to put into things that are higher ROI. So I just encourage you guys, don't get held back in that limited mindset of like, I can't, we're all about how can I in Rainmakers. And sometimes it's trading time, sometimes it's trading resources. So any last thoughts, Aaron, on this topic of EOS, entrepreneurship, rocks, any of these things before we wrap the show?
I think that the one of the coolest things that I've seen come out of it for me. So I own several businesses, but I've got a whole coffee business down in Belize, that we opened up this past year. And what's been so cool to me about this whole idea of delegating and elevating is I've really pulled several of my kids in. My kids are all adult kids. My oldest is 26, my youngest. So I've got a 20, a 22, a 24, and 26. I've got to pull 3 of my kids in. I'm still trying to bait the youngest, but I've got to pull 3 of my different kids in to things that used to be my roles that I've got to delegate down to them, and that's been the coolest part too. So to your point of maybe it's not always pay, maybe it's like privileges. Maybe you're trading privileges for opportunities of them to be taught something. And I know my daughter Faith has taken on, she started by just helping me with some of the accounts payable, accounts receivable stuff, but now Faith is doing all of my QuickBooks work on both of my companies, and does all of the tying off of the books at the end of the month. And for sure, I'll still go back in and clean it up and make sure it looks right to me. But honestly, I think I knew it about her all the way growing up, is she's just so attention to detail. And I'm like, I bet she would really jam at like bookkeeping. It would really awaken something in her that she really loves. And she loves it. She dials everything all in. She's paying all the vendors. She's doing all the payroll. She's doing all these different pieces. And I'm like, that I used to do all those things, but it took me so much time. And she has just come alive by me handing that down to her. And also, like David's helping me with supply chain and getting things down to Belize and ordering things here and things that I was doing before David was doing it. But like he loves doing it. He's managing it so well. Just different opportunities that you're affording to your kids could be a really great thing for them and a gift to you.
That's so good. I love that. Aaron, if any of our listeners want to connect with you, what's the best place for them to do that?
Yeah, I think that, our website, the Collab team. So it's just the Collab, like a baseball team, the collabteam.com. If you want to know anything about EOS, the Collab team /OpsX, OPSX is where we do a lot with EOS and L10s and that kind of stuff. And then you can check us out on Instagram at the Collab team with an E. So just an E on the end is at the Collab team, and you can follow us all those places.
Awesome.
Awesome.
So
Thanks,
much.
Aaron. Love you, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Yes. Thank you so much, guys. Such a privilege.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Rainmaker Family Show. If you're not a part of our mastermind yet, I want to say I think you're missing out. Our heart here at Rainmaker is to create total abundance for you. That's why we're offering a free one-on-one family freedom design session for you, our faithful listener.
Yeah, if you want to hop on a call with our team, see if it's a good fit to build a business that creates time freedom for you, financial abundance, and helps you leave that thriving family legacy. That's what we're all about in our mastermind. You can grab a time on our team's calendar at rainmakerfamily.com/mastermind. Again, that's rainmakerfamily.com/mastermind.